Cradle, Dogs of Fount, Chapter 38, Part 2. Not all the cities that were represented here had militaries, so Arturo understood the need in that regard. And the final presenter was Ryan Cephas. He entered the stage with a loud applause and explained that FaithNet would please the population and make them more accepting of the world changing for the better. He also said it would aid in leveling every city with comparable technology so the world will become smaller as cities grew. He left FaithNet there and talked about examples of software he had in development that would mitigate famine, plagues, and even war. After a half an hour of talking, Cephas left with more applause than what he came in with, and the lights in the seating area were turned on, and people filed out back to the pedway and probably to the lounges in the convention center or to the city to take in this marvel of civilization. The general didn't have an itch for alcohol, but if you knew anything about political conventions, the bar was a great place to get in on real info. He walked down the pedway toward the elevators and looked at the large signage that was primarily in Chinese and under that in English. There wasn't any indication where the bar was until he was at the ritzy elevator bay, and it was designated to be on the third floor, which was called the atrium level. He was alone at that moment, and he stretched his back and let out a yawn. A few business people came and called one of the other elevators and chuckled and chatted among their group. The elevator came, and Arturo appreciated the beige gold trim around the black pin lines and the light gray fabric panels. The man in the elevator was vaping a fragrant candy-like juice, and Arturo gave him a quick look. It seemed everyone here had some money. The bar was sparsely populated with a handful of small groups at the booths with the high black leather panels that looked like massive headboards. He sat at the actual bar alone and gave a short wave to the bald-headed bartender. The bartender raised his head and questioned. "Cola on the rocks," Arturo ordered. The yellow-skinned bartender nodded and brought his drink promptly. The general sat and sipped and occasionally looked toward the entry for any politicians. However, soon he found himself thinking of Fount and if he could or should stop this whole modernization from coming home. Suddenly, a woman sat next to him, and they smiled at each other. "Saw you at breakfast this morning. Looked lonely," the beauty said. "Nah, not lonely," he said and smiled at her. "Boba Bess, right?" "Yes, sir," she said with a smirk. "General. Fount, I believe." The general nodded and tipped an ice chip in his mouth and crunched. "You checking up on me for the scoop?" the general asked. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just curious." "About what?" he asked. "You're impressed with the city?" she stated. "Maybe." There's no maybe about it, sir. I saw your eyes bugging by the windows. But do you see Fount in it? Do you wonder how we keep things in control?" she asked. "Possibly. You have a very low poverty rate in Fount, correct?" She looked at him directly. He nodded and sipped his drink. "Proportionally, we match you," she said with pride, the walking figures behind Arturo shining in her eyes. "Ruthless labor laws, I would guess," Arturo threw out. She gave an ambiguous look and looked at his hands on the bar counter. "No wife?" He laughed momentarily. "Why, you ask? Your age, no ring. Odd to say the least. You married?" "Was." Arturo nodded and finished off his cola. It was a fresh take on a beverage they had back in Fount. Frank's cola was still his idea of a perfect drink, barring alcohol. They sat in silence together for a moment and looked quickly in the eyes once. She stood up and smoothed her feminized blazer. "Come, join me. I'll show you a little bit of what life is like in New Hong Kong." She stood there while the general milled it over. He shrugged and gave a frown of relinquish and stood up. She smiled sharply.